Mired in toxic partisanship, left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
All right, welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us here on this beautiful Monday afternoon. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We're live here on WISL until 2 p.m. Of course, you can comment online, too. We're streaming on the Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, Free Solution group, the Kevin Wilson page, and the Kevin Wilson Twitter account. So wherever you're listening today, appreciate y'all being here and joining us for this show. Now, the topic I want to do for at least most of today's show, we'll see if we stick through the whole thing, but it is something that I've talked about before. I know Tim and I have done some stuff on our Thursday shows, and it's something that for whatever reason, like, just picked up a bunch of steam, like over this past weekend, right? In part because of some stuff that got into the Inflation Reduction Act bill, and kind of the response of progressives to it. And that's how environmental regulations might end up helping the environment, right? So let's set the context of this, right? But what I mean by that, because there's some lefty, what the heck is this libertarian on about now? But what I mean by that is that there are well-intentioned things things that start out with, hey, we're going to make sure that we do our due diligence, and whatever projects you're doing isn't going to hurt the environment. It's not going to cause any damage, right? And this goes back to just because a politician says, or regulators or activists or whoever, just because they come at you with things that sound good intentions, sound reasonable, doesn't mean that those things aren't going to have negative consequences down the line and end up hurting not just the economy or other stuff, but the cause that they are trying to promote. So with environmental regulations, you got all this stuff, like you have environmental review, you have, all this stuff that goes into every single project that exists, and you hear horror stories coming out of places like California, especially, but where every little project can get stuck in review for years and years and years and years, right? And all that time costs money, right? You've got to pay to have the site reviewed, you've got to pay to revise plans and then get it reviewed again, and then go through all this rigmarole to get any project through, right? And on the left side, they think like, well, good, we're stopping those greedy developers from just destroying the planet by building in projects that don't consider all these other factors about protecting the environment. They probably just want to dump their waste into rivers, and like these type of environmental regulations stop that, right? This is what they're thinking. But what actually ends up happening is they're running into issues with, well, how do we build stuff generally, is a problem economically, right? And conservatives and libertarians have been on this a while. Like, hey, there's so much regulation, there's so much red tape to getting anything done. Y'all have probably heard my rant about this for housing stuff, right? Like, it's very expensive to have housing in many places, in part because it's just difficult to build anything. Now, that same thing ends up applying to things that the environmentalists are trying to accomplish right now too. It's difficult to build wind turbines. It's difficult in some cases to add solar panels, both on adding it to a whole field, and also even to add in individual houses in some places across the country. It's difficult to nuclear will be its own thing, but it's difficult to build nuclear. It's difficult to try different solutions to decarbonizing the economy. If this is your goal, let's just assume that this is a worthwhile goal for the sake of this discussion. But if it is your goal to reduce the amount of carbon that's put into the atmosphere by moving away from fossil fuels like coal that do cause some legit health effects, both in production and in burning. Okay, cool. We need to make it as easy as possible then to build a inexpensive alternative to that system. But if you can't build wind, if you can't build solar, if you don't want to accept nuclear, if you don't want to accept some of these other solutions to be able to pull carbon out of the atmosphere because someone might make a profit off of it somewhere, or you need all these environmental reviews, then you're stuck doing nothing. You're stuck having the same exact system that you have now. That is a problem. And on top of that, again, for the folks who aren't as sympathetic to what the green folks want to do, these types of regulations do hurt the economy generally. It's housing, it's general energy production, it's highway building, it's all of this stuff that goes into making our country be able to work effectively. All this infrastructure that makes it work effectively. Like, do you ever wonder why, in cities where mass transit makes sense, like New York, why does it cost so much more per mile to build in New York than it does in, say, Paris or Berlin or any other major city across the world? Why? In part because of these environmental regulations. There's also union stuff, everything, but mostly it's these environmental regulations. And again, if you're a fan of decarbonizing the transportation system, as the lefties want to say, you should want to get rid of the red tape for that to happen. If you want to get people out of gas powered cars and into mass transit, okay, cool. It can't be billions and billions and billions of dollars to build mass transit then. It's got to be relatively straightforward. It's still going to be expensive, but it's got to be relatively inexpensive to do that compared to just expanding highway systems. Great. They're getting in their own way. Again, not just in their own way, but in the way of the country itself expanding. So we've laid all that out, right? We've laid out all these situations. We've laid out, uh, what's going on here with some of the environmental regulations that can end up standing in the way of getting stuff done. Again, and I'm making the assumption too that it's not necessarily a bad thing to move into these systems. And I've said that before. Like, okay, sure, if global warming has it is going to be a negative thing. I don't think it's quite the climate emergency that some of the extreme leftists think it is, and I don't think it's worth the sacrifice to the economy because that costs lives in order to fix this. But if we want to move on to new energy sources, great. Let's figure out a way to do that. But if we can't build anything, if we're stagnant, if we're stuck where we are, we'll never do that. We'll never move beyond where we are. And the only way that we can move beyond where we are is either significant reform, which was some a discussion that started popping up more recently because of people like Joe Manchin talking about that and trying to make the environmental review process simpler and or people just going around the system, right? But that's not going to happen at the energy grid level. It's not going to happen at the mass transit level. Like it's not possible. Maybe it could happen at the geoengineering level, but that might be something that collectively, like, we need to decide. Geoengineering being like people who want to do things to reflect sunlight back, right? Like, okay, we could solve this environmental problem, but we don't know what the other externalities of that thing are. That's something that's worth the environmental review because I'm not that extreme about that. Like, there is some interesting and cool geoengineering stuff out there, but that stuff could have pretty significant consequences for the earth. That stuff should be reviewed. That stuff should be studied. That should take a while. If you're going to make a change that does that, we need to know what the consequences of that change might be. So here's how the rest of the episodes go. We're going to talk about some specific areas in which the environmental regulations get in the way of accomplishing those goals, including other goals as well. And we're going to talk about situations where maybe that environmental review is worth it, and we'll talk about some policy changes that can happen that would actually advance this, right? Like, where's the reform needed? What are some things that we can do about this? And then how we start winning people over on this stuff? And again, what are the other things getting in folks' way, right? Because there's so many people on the left that it's funny. Like, do you want to save the environment or do you want to destroy capitalism? And so many of them, like, I'd rather destroy capitalism than save the environment because if we destroy capitalism, that's the only thing that will protect the environment. No, that's not an option. It's neither realistic nor desirable. And maybe we'll start out with that a bit next too. We'll just like what was the ideology that goes into this, and how they could get out of their own way and like work to eliminate the red tape to accomplish their goals of protecting the environment and everyone else's goals of just being able to build stuff, of being able to do things, of being able to move the economy forward. We've got to do it. All right, thanks again for joining us here on Free Solution. If you want to weigh in this issue, give us a call, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Hey, this is Kevin Wilson, host of A Free Solution. You ever need a tool for just one project, but didn't want to spend the cash for something you'd use just once or twice? Well, there's a new tool library in Rochester where you can borrow just the thing you need instead of buying a new one. It's called the Tool Shed from the Southeast Area Coalition, and membership starts at just $25 a year. Use it for home projects or to support your business. Learn more and become a member at seektoolshed.org. That's SEAC toolshed.org.
Only available in the WISL store at WISL1040.com. Official top quality tees, hoodies, and coffee mugs depicting the colorful WISL logo or the already famous Mount Worstmore line of merch depicting Mount Rushmore style are for worst presidents. Of course, you know who is front and center up on that mountain. WISL official items make perfect gifts, or they're a great way for you to make a personal statement. Locally produced and sold only in the WISL store at WISL1040.com.
A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thanks again for joining us. We're live here at WYSL until 2 p.m. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. Or leave your comment online, wherever you're listening today. Any of the Free Solution pages, the Kevin Wilson pages, or the podcast too. Later on, send our page a message. Love hearing from you. And so we're talking about whether or not environmental regulations get in the way of protecting the environment. Specifically, we're talking about mostly like the global warming thing, although there's certainly other situations where this could apply too. I mean, pollution generally, again, if you can't set up a reasonable energy alternative to coal, and I think that is a reasonable thing to do, then you're left with two options: either continue burning the dirty fuel or let people go without power. I mean, California seems to be going with the latter. Not the choice I would make, and not the choice I think the people of California deserve, but okay. That's certainly an option. And so we'll talk about, like, well, again, how do we advance these goals? And let's talk about the ideology that kind of goes into this too. And again, it's funny, it's started to pop up a lot more recently. We've talked about this a bunch on this show, but like the ideology that goes into this, there's a certain like environmental mindset among not the like kind of moderate Democrats and neoliberals, like those folks who are concerned about the environment, or like conservatives and libertarians who are concerned about externalities too. But these are like the left-wing ideologues, right? Like the type of folks who say like terrifying stuff about, how the earth is overpopulated, which can lead you down some pretty dark paths, that we need to have negative GDP, that like literally we need to shrink the economy to make sure that we stop harming the earth. And that's, and that we're in an existential crisis right now. So like any measures that we can take to decrease carbon dioxide output are justified, right? Like just really fanatical stuff, right? Again, not considering like what happens when you if you shrink GDP, if you cut off emerging energy sources for folks, what ends up happening is literally people will die from it. Like it's happened in places like in Japan apparently when they started switching away from nuclear temporarily. They're switching back to it now. When they switched away and energy prices were really high for them, they're buying expensive, Russian gas, and then people people literally died from that, not from freezing to death necessarily, but just they had worse health outcomes that resulted in more deaths because they were keeping the heat really low to be able to afford it. Like that, there are real life consequences to scarcity, particularly when it ends up being self-imposed. Like we try to deal with the scarcity of the what the world hands to us, but like don't put it on ourselves. So some of these folks, they're what they're concerned with because they take this fanatical approach to that. They say the only way we can deal with this is by eliminating capitalism, right? So that seems to be their goal in some cases. Again, this isn't all Democrats. This is the fanatics, right? There are some reasonable folks out there. This is the fanatics. These and when given the option, like, hey, listen, fanatics, do you want to save the earth, but companies are going to play a part in doing that, or would you rather destroy capitalism? They say, yeah, no, let's destroy capitalism. That's the only way. That's the only thing going forward. But again, if this is considered an emergency and you want to remove those barriers to, in their minds, literally saving the planet, why wouldn't you get rid of those things that get in your way? Why wouldn't you streamline that review process? Why wouldn't you make it as easy as possible to be able to build to get to where we need to be to decarbonize the economy? Again, assuming that's your goal. Again, I kind of like the simplify the regulations aspect, not just for the environmental reasons, but also because of general economic reasons too, because it should be easier to build stuff. And there's a solution out there to that too. And like I said, I had mentioned, I think I mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act is actually a government funding bill that the Manchin attached an amendment to that would impose a 2-year limit on National Environmental Policy Act reviews, would require permits to be issued within 180 days of conclusion of the National Environmental Policy Act review, and would impose 150-day statute of limitations for lawsuits challenging these projects, right? Because again, what ends up happening, it's not just first you got to pay all this money to get the review, and then you got to get it approved, and then people can still sue you, and that can end up in court for years and years and years. And that this is a way to get around that. If these leftists are actually serious about solving the problems of we need to build more wind power, we need to build more solar power, we need to build more mass transit, we need to find different ways to provide energy, great, let's do it. Like let's figure it out. And again, to me, I'm like, yeah, more stuff. Let's go. Like let's figure it out. I'm all for providing a whole bunch of different solutions and moving away from solutions that were good for the time. Was it coal? Great for the time. Burning oil, great for the time. Cool. If we have something better, let's try it. Those are miracles. Those advanced human civilization, advanced society to where we are today. That's great. If we got something better, cool. Let's try it. If it's not actually better and it's just ideological, maybe not. But there is something better out there, and we've got to make it possible to even try that out. And we'll let me get to a comment on Facebook. It's a anonymous Facebook user says you should also keep in mind that in New York State you can request to have a body of water be reclassified. For example, AA special is used for drinking, or Class D fresh surface water is designated for fishing. It means you can lobby to have the class of water revised if it's more convenient for your business. No, interesting. I mean, yeah, that's something that you could do in either direction, right? It could go and let's make this more strict versus let's make this less strict in order to serve either your business or your activism interest, right? And that's not necessarily a negative thing. Sometimes it might make sense to do those things, but also, if you do that and it makes it more strict and it makes a project impossible to do, one that would significantly benefit the community, well, yeah, that's not great when that happens all the time. And we end up with heckler's veto about building everything. Another comment on Facebook says, turn the environmental agencies into service organizations. It'd be interesting. Again, how do we make sure, like, if these organizations are to exist at all, right? Less enforcement, more support and service, doing things better. All right, yeah, I'd be open to that discussion. I mean, like the libertarian in me is always kind of like, all right, how can we get rid of this stuff? But all right, if it's better, yeah, this is this is the whole approach to things, right? Like if we could do a little bit better right now, then let's try that. Do a little bit better. And the other thing too that comes into play with like the ideological approach too is like, all right, so these folks who say they want to help the environment, they want to decarbonize the economy, etc. Here's another way they can do it. Nuclear power. Long-time listeners to the show will know that I'm a fan of nuclear power. We've talked about it quite a few times before, and there's some cool opportunities out there with nuclear power, and it is a relatively carbon-free source of energy. It's literally the safest form of energy that we have. Even the deaths that have come from like well-known accidents. There's no people who died from 3 Mile Island. There's very few people who died from the Fukushima accident, and the worst one, Chernobyl, still not great. But there's things that we can learn from that. It's preventable. It's safer than like wind power, for goodness sakes. Like there are few deaths per like a megawatt hour for nuclear power than there are for any other energy source. And it's after the initial production of the facility, carbon free. Okay, again, if that's your goal, let's move towards that. But why don't people do that in the United States? Well, it's crazy expensive because people got freaked out by 3 Mile Island, and we added a bunch of regulation to it and made it nearly impossible to do here. If we make it easier, then we will have a good, reasonable, viable alternative to dirtier forms of fuel. But the hang up on it for many of these folks who are advocating for, alternative source of energy is like, well, nuclear power is dirty. It doesn't count. Let's just do wind and solar. These are the only ones that we want. Just do wind and solar. And they're stuck on it. But wind and solar have drawbacks. It doesn't work in every community. It's expensive in some areas. It does take up a lot of land, and that is a problem. And one of the things that we'll need to talk about when we talk about solutions is like, okay, if you do have this land that is dedicated towards energy use, there's a lot of folks who object to that being in their community just because it's taking up otherwise valuable space. And then how do we navigate that? Is it navigated just through the market? Is it through local review? Is it through state imposition? What does that look like? And I know that's a serious issue, particularly in rural communities, is, hey, you got a big solar area coming in. We're going to clear cut a bunch of trees on what could still potentially be farmland to run solar. Is that the best use of land in this case? Well, maybe. We'll talk about it. But again, I think that the hangups that the folks on the left have about nuclear power is a problem because the only other way to get around it without simplifying and streamlining the regulations is to subsidize it, which is what the Biden administration has chosen to do. Is kudos to them for at least considering nuclear power. Like I guess like small bit of kudos, but instead of just subsidizing that, it would be just a tiny bit better just to make it easier, to make it cheaper, to make it so that communities and private companies can just do this thing without having the government come in and support it. So we don't have to hear the argument, oh, the only way this exists is with government. Why aren't you just accept that this type of mass energy production can only happen with the government? Well, it can happen without the government if the government can step out of the way. Just worry about the most serious, most egregious safety violations and do a little bit to keep the community safe. We know a lot more now. We can make this work. It's possible. We can do it effectively, cheaper, help the environment, win, 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 win. And we still get to keep capitalism too. That's a win for me. Maybe not for some of the folks, but that's a win for me. Great. It doesn't bother me if people make money off of this, as long as they are providing value and serving a community. Fine, right? Like that's what companies are supposed to do. But if you're hung up ideologically on that, well, maybe you keep those barriers in the way and hurt the environment because of your ideology. All right. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. When we come back, we'll talk more about some specific situations and dive a bit more into the solutions. Thanks again for joining us. Give us a call, 585-346-2000 if you want to participate. Be back in just a few.
Pray for the USA. AM 1040 Avon Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, and FM 95.5 Spencerport.
Here's the latest forecast from the News 10 NBC Weather Center. For tonight, we'll see some showers, a little breezy on the cool side again in the 40s and 50s. On your Tuesday, more of the same, mostly cloudy, breezy, some windswept showers, maybe a rumble of thunder as well. Wednesday, we'll see more in the way of some showers, but they'll start to dissipate a little bit, and we should dry up heading into Thursday and Friday. I'm Rich Cordelia, WYSL.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Labor Day has come and gone, but don't forget, September days can be some of the nicest summer days. The sky blue, clouds puffy and white, temperatures warm. Perfect weather for porch and patio. Springwater Amish Workshop still has a good supply of pressure-treated pine furniture, as well as pieces made of poly. Rockers, gliders, end tables, swings, English garden bench, folding Adirondack chairs, tete-a-tete and balcony settees. Premium quality yard items on end of summer sale clearance at Springwater Amish Workshop. Hunting season's on the way. Be prepared with a new blind featuring quiet glide windows, full insulation, smart-sided exterior. There's one on the lot for you to check out. Everyone needs storage space. Springwater Amish Workshop has the solution. Don't rent self-storage when you can purchase on rent-to-own a quality Amish-built storage shed. Every rental payment means you own more of your shed while you're using it. From buildings to gazebos, lighthouses to wind chimes, Springwater Amish Workshop has it all at 7936 Mill Street, Springwater. Open 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, Saturday 9 to 3. SpringwaterAmishWorkshop.com.
This fall, find new roads with a new ride from Victor Chevrolet. Now, lease a 2022 Chevy Trailblazer LT for just $269 a month for 36 months.
$2,500 cash or trade required.
If you need a pickup, get the versatility of a 2022 Chevy Silverado Custom LTD Crew Cab for just $399 a month for 24 months.
$2,500 cash or trade in closing.
And then there's the 2022 Chevy Equinox All-Wheel Drive LT, only $269 a month for 36 months.
$2,500 cash or trade equity in closing.
And don't forget, Victor Chevrolet has an unbeatable pre-owned selection. Whether it's a Chevy or not, trust your vehicle to our Chevy Certified Service Department. Come see how easy it is to do business with us. Find new roads at Victor Chevrolet, Route 96 in Victor.
Visit VictorChevrolet.com.
These lease deals include returning lessee rebate. All factory rebates, incentives, and discounts are applied. Security deposit is waived. 10,000 mile allowance per year, 25 cents each additional mile. Must have leasing household. Tier 1 credit approval required. Lessee responsible for repair and maintenance. Conditions apply. Get details at dealer.
I'm Stephen Nichols. Since 1984, Nichols has been family operated and a trusted name for home service. We provide plumbing and electrical installation and service. And I am thrilled to announce that we are growing and looking to add to our scope of services. We are looking for a professional handyman who is skilled in drywall repair, carpentry, and more. If you are interested in joining the best team in Rochester, call 585-299-3101 or visit nicholselectric.com to fill out an application.
With the high cost of gas and groceries, families are making difficult choices. At Isaac, we believe you shouldn't have to hold on to an old, inefficient furnace because it costs. Experience improved home comfort this winter with Isaac, the easy choice to save on a new furnace and your energy bills. Get a Lennox furnace for as low as $69 a month with 3 months deferred payments and rebates up to $1,200. Isaac is the easy choice for home comfort. Visit IsaacHeating.com today.
Now is the time to make sure your child is receiving education, not indoctrination. Archangel School is academically challenging, Common Core, and CRT free, a brighter school experience that honors your traditional American values. If you're looking for an affordable Catholic faith-based school for your child from preschool through grade 12, come to Archangel School's open house Thursday, October 6th from 6 to 7:30. Enroll now at archangelschool.com or call 585-247-1112.
A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today. Thank you so much for joining us here on this wonderful Monday afternoon. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. And, of course, if you're listening online, to leave your comments. So we're on the Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, the Free Solution group, the Kevin Wilson page, the Kevin Wilson Twitter, wherever you're listening today. Appreciate y'all being here. Appreciate y'all listening. Comment from John Barron on Facebook, who says, hemp is a great biofuel. It even grows in infertile soil. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the solution, right? Again, like when I say let's try all the things. Yeah, that's what I mean. Stuff like this too, is that could be a good way of being able to make energy dense fuels that can be used for travel, that can be used for, all sorts of stuff, heating, whatever. I don't know all the uses of hemp, but yeah, that's part of it. Again, if we can do that, make it commercially viable, and it is in many ways, then do it. And the barriers are sometimes, but not always, but oftentimes just the government getting in the way of people checking these things out and trying them out. So I want to get to some specific projects, right? And the other thing I want to make sure I said this is that there's a great Thomas Sowell quote that goes, there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs, right? Whatever you want to accomplish here, if your goal is let's protect the environment, there is no one perfect solution here. You're going to end up with trade-offs. There are trade-offs to the energy environment we have now. There's great things that have come out of burning fossil fuels to get to where we are. It is demonstrably, no question, for anyone who's not an absolute fanatic, that we are better off now than we were a few hundred years ago before the industrial and fossil fuel revolutions. We have heat, we have an abundance of food, we have shelter. But it is not everyone in the world, but so many people are now so much more comfortable, so much more healthy, and living longer and living better than they were before. I would not ever trade my life now for the richest person 100 years ago. That's a good question to think about this. Would you trade your life now with Andrew Carnegie, in his prime? Well, no, I wouldn't. I have so much more stuff now. Even if I were richer back then, there's wealth for the average person that is beyond what was even accessible for someone like that. In part, a lot of that's built on fossil fuels, great, but there's trade-offs. Again, I said I'm not unrealistic. I'm not naive to this stuff. There are trade-offs to using things like coal. It's a dirty, messy process for extraction. It causes health problems for when it's burned. We've seen that here in the U.S. We saw that in China. It's just a thing that is a fact of that. That is a trade-off. On net, it's probably still good. But then if we can get to the next solution, something that's a little bit better, a little bit cleaner, a little bit more effective without having that consequence, great. And if that trade-off is just, well, we're going to keep capitalism, great. Yeah, no, I 100%, smash that button every single time if that's what the trade-off is. Awesome. So let's talk about some specific examples, though, right? So there's one of the most famous ones, which is the wind farm that's supposed to take place off of Martha's Vineyard, right? But a bunch of NIMBYs, not in my backyard folks, are getting in the way of that, and have gotten 16 years, I think that project has been stalled out, right? It just keeps getting stalled out in lawsuits and another review and another review and more lawsuits. And these tools, which again were created with the idea to protect the environment, end up with folks who are using those same tools to get get in the way of doing something that could help the environment. And it's one of the classic examples that's easy to point to of like the hypocrisy of like many of the people there, including many of the ones who would say that they want a greener economy, are the ones opposing this because, well, it blocks the view, or what if something could happen here? What if, one of the things falls or it leaks oil or whatever, right? Again, everything has trade-offs. Wind power can be good in many situations, but there is a risk that it could hurt birds, it could spill oil, it could crash to the ocean, it could not work when you need it to work. Trade-offs, always trade-offs. Just again, something to always keep in mind for every single situation, that there's going to be trade-offs, good and bad. You just try to get the best advantage you can in that situation. It's also the California high-speed rail line. Again, why has it gotten caught up? Well, in part because of environmental reviews and or local objections, right? Like, hey, yeah, in theory, we want, high-speed mass transit through this area, but just not through here, not through this town, not at this time, whatever it is, right? and that ends up costing a lot of money each time you have to reroute, each time you end up having to do another environmental review for another section of track, each time you have to get over the lawsuits, it costs money. And I know, and I mentioned this at the last segment, right? And I know, like, there's some folks thinking, because this is a thing in this area with wind farms, which again, they do have negative externalities. They're noisy. The technology keeps getting better, but they're noisy. I get it. And but so are other forms of production of energy production, right? And same with solar farms. Now, the solar farm objection is interesting to me, and this is one I could probably have some like Assemblywoman Marjorie Burns on to talk about this, because I know she does this stuff. But like there's a process in New York State right now where a lot of the ability to be able to build those ends up coming from New York State, getting approval from New York State, and there's less local representation in the discussions about what goes on here. But to me, I think that's like it's kind of the wrong way to approach it, right? Like, to me, it's like unlike wind, which has a handful of negative externalities, and Tim O'Connor on Facebook says they cause vibrations, light flicker, humming. Yeah, no, I mean, all legit things, right? If someone's near your home, like, if you're on your house and someone builds one near you, and now you have to deal with this stuff that has demonstrable harm to you. So how are you compensated for that? But with solar farms, it's interesting, because I know, like, one of the objections, like, well, what if this could be used for something else? Well, if that's the objection to it, then the market can deal with that. The market can deal with what is the best use of this land. It's, if you are, that you can let prices solve that situation. If the best use for that land is solar, and that's who's willing to pay the money for that land, great. If the best use for that land is farming, then that's what will get the best price for that land. If the best use for that land is a brewery, then that's what that we can let the market solve that problem in particular. As for negative externalities with broken panels and whatnot, that's a different thing. You got to price that in. If you're going to do those things, you need to pay for that cost. In the same way you need to pay for the cost of fracking, right? Like, it's one of those things people are worried about. Like, what happens if something goes wrong? All right, price that in. What happens if there's, if it imposes a cost on the infrastructure of the area, on the roads, on the water systems, et cetera? Okay, we can price that in. There are ways that we have the market to do that. And Tim O'Connor on Facebook again says, right now towns get compensated with a new fire truck and better roads, not, for example, lower taxes and improved services. Yeah, I mean, that's again, and it's weird. Like, the compensation ends up going to, like, the government in some cases. What I was referring to as compensation, I actually meant, like, towards the individual. But yeah, for the towns, that's part of it too. Like, and what are the trade-offs of allowing this to happen? Again, who gets to make that decision? Is it the individuals involved, the ones who actually own the land or are adjacent to the land, or is it a town? Is it a state? And to me, getting those decisions down to the lowest level possible is desirable. But again, all these things, all these reviews, all these steps, all these different complicated mechanisms to make decisions and to make sure you protect the environment, when you add it up all together, ends up being incredibly difficult to move ahead with building anything, but in particular this environmental stuff, and goes right in the face of what the intent of what these original laws are. And so when you have something where the original intent of the laws are getting in the way of the thing that it was supposed to help, it's time for reform. But again, instead of reform, we're getting folks like Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker, and I'm trying to remember who the other one was, but these senators should rather virtue signal about wanting to oppose big business and wanting to protect these regulations that are getting in their own way, instead of working to actually solve the problem. Yeah. And Tim, yeah, I know you're agreeing with me. Tim on Facebook was like, yeah, I was agreeing with you. Yeah, I know, man. I know you're agreeing with me. I got you. And just reading your comment out. And yeah, with we can fix some of these things. We can solve some of these problems. You just need to not cling to your ideological priors and say, what's the best thing that we can do right now to advance this good thing, to do something good for our country? And, sometimes it's tough because you've got to wonder, like, is Congress capable of doing that still? Can they do it? All right. Anyway, give us a call, 585-346-3000. It's 585-346-3000. We'll be back here on A Free Solution. Just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to Simple Tech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that Simple Tech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at Simple Tech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
As a veteran of the United States military, I can finally get the opportunity to enjoy special events, things that we couldn't afford, thanks to VetTix. Every empty seat at a concert, a game, or a play is a missed opportunity to say thanks to a veteran and service member. We can give our veterans a special event where they too can create their own cherished memories. Visit vettix.org. Find out how you can make a difference in a veteran's life.
WYSL. Getting podcasts of your favorite WYSL shows is easier and better than ever. Use your favorite device, PC, mobile, or tablet to visit WYSL1040.com. Simply click on the podcast tab to select, listen, download, and share instantly. Works great with any wireless device. No additional apps are necessary. Podcasts of all our local shows are easier to access and play, so share them with your friends. And thanks for listening anywhere, anytime to the voice of liberty, the WYSL stations. A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson here today. Thanks again for joining us here on this wonderful Monday afternoon. We're live here on WYSL until 2 p.m. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. Or leave your comments online too, wherever you're listening today. Appreciate y'all being here. Again, we're talking about whether or not environmental regulations end up getting in the way of actually protecting the environment. Most of this conversation is about climate change. Again, you can apply this to a handful of other situations too, but most of this is talking about climate change just because it's kind of been in the news. People talked about it, and it is one of those things where it's like we can build a better life. We can build a cleaner future through growth. Again, the folks who legitimately worry about me, it's not like the moderate Democrats who like are just somewhat, fascinated with like wind and solar. Like those people are fine. The degrowth folks, those are the ones who actually scare me. The ones who talk about how we have too many people. Like, yeah, no, watch out for those folks. Don't let them anywhere near power. But even the moderate folks, again, they'd rather virtue signal about protecting the environment than doing something tangible, something meaningful to allow us to get done. Because the trade-off to them is that, well, then other aspects of capitalism would be more likely to thrive. Well, okay, that seems like a win-win to me. I want that. I want both of those things. I do want cleaner, better energy sources and also capitalism to thrive. Like, why not do that? And again, the solution that's out there right now is an amendment that would slightly limit how far out the National Environmental Policy Act reviews can go. It's just one thing, because then there's regulations that happen at the state level too. California is still going to have their environmental reviews. So is New York. It's still going to be a thing. That's still a hurdle that's going to happen. It's just going to be a slightly more limited thing where you can't have this stuff go on forever. It is a moderate reform. It's a good first step. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, that's why I like it. That's why I'm like, you know what? Fine. This isn't exactly where we need to be, but it's a good first step. It's a good start to say, like, let's just limit this a little bit where we can't have someone come in partway through the project review and wreck everything just because they object to it for sometimes business reasons, sometimes fanatical activist reasons, or like whatever, where they just don't want it in their backyard. Doesn't matter. Like, there has to come a point where we allow stuff to get built. And again, that's what we're stuck on as a country. It's there's all these folks who can object. Again, we get the same thing with not just this stuff, not with wind power, with solar power, with nuclear power, especially. Again, people get freaked out by it, mostly because I think, misunderstand, what the actual danger in those situations is. It's far less than most people think. And because the government imposes a lot of costs because they want to be extra sure. And you could think back to the same thing with like the COVID discussion, right? Where I said there's no such thing as perfect safety. There's no possible way that the government can 100% guarantee that their policies are going to prevent you from getting COVID. Like, it's not quite possible, right? And even doing so, even attempting to do so, even if it lowers the number of people who were to get sick, and that's we're not going to rehash that now, but even if it were to do that, there's a trade-off to that. There's trade-off to quality of life, of you getting to see your family, of you being able to thrive in your career, of you being able to see your friends and build your community and do more things, and to have good mental health. There's all these trade-offs to those things. The government can't guarantee perfect safety in any of these situations. Yeah, some stuff's going to go wrong. Some stuff still goes wrong now. Even with all the environmental reviews, even with all the stuff, there's, either stuff you miss or there's corruption or there's something. Like, stuff's going to go wrong. We have to accept that is the trade-off for freedom. That we're going to do a lot of really great things if we allow people to just like pursue them. And, if we don't, we will both have the damage of the environment and the festering of these other problems and the expense of trying to get anything done in our society. And like, we will suffer, all of us, rich, poor, all of us will suffer because of our inability to progress. It's a serious challenge for our political system. I kind of threw it out at the end, but at the end of last segment, like, can Congress get over this stuff? Can they work towards facilitating a solution that has some things that you're not happy with, something that might make some folks in your base mad, but facilitating a solution that is better than the status quo? Again, I always say, I'm a libertarian. I can't stand a lot of stuff coming out of the Congress, and I don't like a lot of the compromises that come out of there. But sometimes engineering something that is better than the status quo is a good thing. And I know I got a comment from Tim O'Connor. He says, we're already demonstrating our inability to progress. Flying cars, please. Yeah, maybe. Again, flying cars would be interesting. I don't think that people are going to be able to drive them. It would be great. But we should get to the point of being able to do that to facilitate better transportation. There's going to be risks involved. There's risk now. There's always risk. There's trade-offs to that risk. Sure, you have the risk of like something might get damaged, someone might get hurt, something might happen, but the risk of doing nothing is still a choice. It's still a choice to remain stagnant. It's still a choice to not improve our lives. It's still a choice to, continue polluting in the way that we are now too. Again, if that's your prerogative. And there are interesting ways to be able to approach this. If it is an actual emergency, like folks say, cool. Yeah. Let companies be able to do their thing. They see the opportunity in this too. And they see the opportunity in providing new interesting sources of power. So I'm excited and terrified of what happens when like the fusion discussion starts happening like for real, when it's not just theoretical, as we see some of these new experiments coming out where they're able to sustain it for longer and longer times. Well, cool. There's a huge opportunity there. It's going to terrify people, and it's going to take so long to get that off the ground, even though it may completely change the way we see and consume energy all across the world. It's going to be very cool. There's going to be risk involved. Like it's going to happen. There's going to be some risk involved. But think of the opportunity there if we're successful in that stuff. And that's what we have to forge those compromises and think of ways to be able to move ahead, even knowing that risk could happen. We need to build, we need to develop, we need to continue working at ways to make our lives better. And right now, the folks who are nervous, the folks who are terrified, the folks who want to keep throwing red tape at the situation are preventing that. Republican and Democrat too. Democrats particularly in this discussion, but it does happen on the conservative side too. All of the government bureaucracy, all the government regulation that makes it impossible for us to do things. Better energy future, better housing, better just new businesses, stuff that I couldn't even think of or imagine. Think of all the wasted opportunity out there because some people just can't ever get off the ground. I know some folks do, but the folks on the margins who might be able to do something great, who can't get off the ground because there are too many barriers in the way. That's the libertarian future, right? That's the future that we envision, is that those barriers to entry are small, that they're reasonable, that they're influenced by the market, that there is a consideration for safety and fraud and things like that, but it doesn't become so stifling that nothing's able to thrive, that we're not stuck where we are and just having fights about redistributing the scraps that we have left. No, we can build something better. We can build something more awesome. And I don't even know what those things are. And by we, I mean, not me individually, not the government. I mean, all of the possibility that exists out there, the folks that I don't know, the folks who are dreaming up very cool things, who can get off the ground if the state gets out of the way. There's so many awesome things that we could do out there. And Tim O'Connor says, "You're inspiring me." Oh, good. I'm glad, Tim. And and so, just to kind of wrap this up again, I think there's an opportunity for shared goals in these situations. There is an opportunity for reasonable compromise. And I don't often say that as a libertarian, but I do see that in this particular situation of how can we both do better by the environment and make it easier for capitalism to thrive and expand the possibilities of our future. This is a pretty small step in that. It definitely doesn't go as far as I would want to go. It's a pretty small step in that. Don't always agree with Joe Manchin, and we'll see if the Senate can take it on. We'll see if they can get over their ideological priors, Republicans and Democrats, to be able to work together to do something useful, which doesn't happen as often as I want. It's not too often where I get to look at what Congress is doing and say, hey, actually, that's a great thing. It only happens. I feel like I'm usually complaining about stuff, but here's a couple real solutions that can leave us off just a tiny bit better. And it just requires you to trust in the possibility of freedom. It requires you to believe in liberty just a tiny bit, and to, again, not even fully, just a little bit lighter. The iron grip on our economy just needs to loosen slightly. That's it. That doesn't seem unreasonable to me. That seems like a good compromise to make, and we'll see if Congress has the gumption to get there. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. I will be back on Wednesday. Larry Sharpson tomorrow. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, folks. Take care.